I got this text 2 days ago from Wells Fargo alert to something.com and said, click this link to secure your account right away. I, of course, knew immediately this link was bogus. I reported it as spam and deleted the number. But I always think when I get this stuff like, who in the world is actually clicking on these links? Then I think someone must be clicking on the links because they keep sending these links out to people. And then coincidentally, today I read an article in the Dallas Morning News about somebody that scammed out of $7,000 during this rental scam. So I was thinking, let me actually do an episode today about ways to identify scammers, because with the hot housing market, it is hot, believe it or not, and which means a hot rental market as well. Folks become desperate, especially people with bad credit or a bad financial situation. They may try to cut corners to get into a place and they end up getting scammed and then put back even further from a financial standpoint. So we're going to talk about 8 common scams, a couple ways to identify these scams up front, and how to report scams and what to do if you get scammed. Let's get it. Welcome back to House Rich, the first time home buyer show where we help millennials figure out how in the world do I buy my first home. Today we're talking how not to get scammed when renting a property. So we're going to start from the beginning as far as identifying a property online, go all the way back to potentially handing a bogus person money. So first and foremost is identifying the property online. So if you're looking at pictures and you see watermarks on the photo, like MLS stuff in the corner, it's probably not the person's listing that is posting the photo, because they wouldn't list the watermark on the photo. Like, it doesn't really make any sense. You want the photo to be in the best light possible. People watermark photos so other folks won't steal them. If people want to legitimately share the photo or share the listing, they'll just ask the person for permission and they'll give them a picture where the watermarks are not on the photo. So be very, very aware of that. 2, the listing is too vague, right? So people want to get their property rented, so they're going to list a good description of the property. Even an amateur person, you always see like the jokes about when realtors say, hey, cozy means small, fixer-upper means a pile of trash, right? People write all these nice words in the description to get you to come to the property and view it. If somebody's just like, hey, single-family home on the corner of XY and Main Street, close to the freeway, and that's the whole description, like, who is going to be enticed by that description? And also, they're probably putting a very, very short description because maybe they have a bunch of bogus listings all over the place and they don't want to take a bunch of time in order to put a bunch of detail out, because they know the listing may eventually get taken down, so they don't want to put a bunch of effort into the description. So beware of poorly written and very vague property descriptions. And also, once again, it's not their property. They may have not actually ever been inside the property or in the neighborhood, so they can't write a very detailed description in the first place. Number 3 is shady/suspect paperwork. For the most part, landlords are going to make you fill out the application online. Like, they don't want to go through the hassle of handing people paper documents and having them fill out paper. It's a lot easier to do everything online. It's 2023, right? And a sign of suspect paperwork is actually stuff that's asking for too much information. Like, I've seen a rental application where the person was asking for bank account numbers, routing numbers, credit card numbers, the CVS, I think it's not CVS, but you know what I'm talking about, those 3 numbers on the back of the credit card, the whole account number. And I'm like, no, this is way too much information. This is clearly a bogus application. They're just trying to get your information and then run off with it, and then you'll never see them again. And they'll take down that bogus listing and then move on to the next unfortunate suspect or victim. Yeah, they're the suspect. Now, the evil opposite twin of the too much paperwork is the no paperwork person, right? It's the, hey, I understand with you. I had credit issues too. I feel you. This is for the culture, or whatever words they try to use to associate with the person. We're not going to do a background check. Just give us, maybe 2 or 3 months of the security deposit up front. Here's the thing. I always say, would you rent to somebody without doing any sort of background check on that person? You wouldn't, right? Because they could have evictions. They could have a poor history of paying their bills on time. You want to understand who you're renting to. They could be a felon. They could have sort of legal issues. And I'm not saying people can't get second chances, but you at least want to know what their situation is so you can make the determination to say, hey, I do or don't want to rent this person a property. If they're just doing no background check on you, like, what sense would that really make? Especially when there's a bunch of people that are probably looking to rent this very same property. All right, so now they have some legit looking paperwork. They're going to do a background check on you. But number 5 is asking you to pay the money before all this stuff is complete due to some fake sense of urgency. It's like, oh, we have a bunch of people coming to view the property. If you give me that deposit now, we can hold your spot. Or no, the utilities are going to get shut off if you get in the property now. The last person did X, Y, and Z bad. It'll help with stopping the interruption in your utilities, or some BS sense of urgency. Always think like, why are you the special person that they're making this exception for? They're going to secure the property for you before they even do the background check. Spoiler alert, they're not doing a background check. They're going to collect the money and then run off with it. And so what they may also do is just get a bunch of information from you. It's like, okay, well, what we need right now in the application is to run this check is your mother's maiden name. We need your social, date of birth. They'll just try to pry a bunch of information from you that can be used to create a fake profile, and then they can do some other sort of scamming down the line, even unrelated to you filling out the paperwork for the apartment. That's why you always want there to be a legit paper trail, like a legit organization or like some legit software that you're filling out the application for online. And you can actually Google the software company to make sure that it's actually a legit organization, because they have to actually give their information and actually pay in order to sign up to use like legit software. And then landlords want to do this, right? Like they want to make life easier. Like they'll pay $29.99 so that you can just pay your rent, every month on the first, and just it hits the deposit. They don't have to knock on the door. They're not looking for paper checks. It's a lot easier for landlords just to do everything online. Well, almost everything online, except for they should be meeting you in person. They may give you some nonsense excuse where they can't meet you in person for some reason. Maybe they're out of the country. Maybe they're traveling for work, and they have their representative or their lawyer, I'm doing air quotes, reach out to you via email from some BS address as well, because you can just make up like a .com address. If they can't meet you in person, be very, very wary of that, because once again, why wouldn't your landlord want to meet you in person? Like, because somebody can have a good profile online, but you kind of want to get a good vibe for how this person works and how this person interacts with you, and are they at least respectful during their initial conversation with you. The great Chris Rock says, when you meet somebody for the first time, you're just meeting their representative. Well, if they can't have some decorum when they're meeting you the first time, and it goes both ways as far as the tenant or the landlord, they're probably somebody you should be wary of. So if they don't want to meet you in person, that is a very, very big red flag. I'm a realtor in Dallas and would love to help you reach your goals of home ownership. So click the link in the description and just schedule a call no matter where you are on your journey. Not in Dallas? No worries, I can help connect you with a vetted realtor in your local jurisdiction as well. And feel free to share with friends, family, and foes. Everyone gets love. Now, of course, if they don't meet you in person, they can't actually show you the property. So they may send you some pictures of the property. They may do like, hey, I can do a video walkthrough of the property for you, or some sort of nonsense. Like, they are not the person that owns the property. Like, it probably isn't the property that they're listing because they don't have access to the property. And number two, it may be the property, but it may not be anywhere near the shape that they're showing on the photos. Now, you're probably thinking, why would somebody rent a property that they've never actually been inside? Because maybe the person renting you the property is giving some like well below market rate, or maybe 70–80% of the market rate. And it seems like such a great deal. It's such a great deal because it's all profit for them because they don't own the property. Be very wary if like the rent is just oddly under whatever the market is, because you hear stories about people saying, hey, I'm renting for, I know this is not a real number, but let's say to make the numbers easy, like market rent in the area is like $1,000. And they're like, oh, I've been renting for, my rent is like $700. You hear, wow. And then when you go back, it's because they've been renting that place for like 8, 9, 10 years. And the landlord's just like, hey, I'd rather keep this great tenant in here than maybe, getting an extra $100 or $200 a month out of them, and maybe them going somewhere else and then maybe getting a bad tenant in their place. So if they've been there for a while, most likely that person will have below market rent. But as soon as they move out, the landlord is bringing the rent up to the market value. So why would they just randomly have you pay well under market rent? It's to try to get you in the place quick so you don't have to ask a bunch of questions, and then they get your money and then they run off. Now, let's say the background check that they allegedly ran worked out, the paperwork that they allegedly did on you was all good, and they're like, everything's good to go, just wire me the security deposit. That's not a thing. Landlords are not asking you to wire money. Folks ask you to wire money in this situation because it's something you can't get back, and it's like hard to trace. You can't reverse a wire transaction. So once they have the money, they just run off. Like, the landlord is going to ask you to either pay with a security deposit, or what do you call it, a cashier's check in person, mail it to them. Once again, in person, you can check their ID to see who they are. They mail it to you. You have to mail it to an actual address, or maybe worst case scenario, like a P.O. box. But once again, if there's at least a P.O. box, there's at least a paper trail of where the money went. Or once again, they'll set up some sort of online system for you to pay your bills reoccurringly as well, because that makes it a lot easier on them. Now, sometimes there's situations where you just may have questions about if it's legit or not. It may not be a super obvious situation. So here's a couple things you can do. Well, one, if you're not sure about, especially if somebody like calls you back and you may think, hey, this seemed a little suspicious, actually call the number back on the listing to see if it was a spoof number or not. Because I don't know if you ever got like a phone call from like your exact phone number almost. You've seen like people can spoof phone numbers. Two, like Google the landlord, right? If they're an individual person, you can Google and see if there's any like complaints online about them. If they're a big company, you can see what's going on with the company. You can look them up on like LinkedIn, maybe. You can maybe find their Facebook profile and see if they're a legit landlord. Sometimes if there's a small landlord, they may not have a paper trail, but you can at least do that. Two, or I think we're on three, Google the actual address, right? Because you'll see other listings. You'll see it posted maybe on Craigslist. That's when it gets a little suspect, but you also see it like on realtor.com, Zillow.com, apartments.com, and other place with rental listings. And you can see who's actually listing the property. If it's the same person on every site, it is most likely legit. Like scammers are not paying to put their listing on a bunch of different websites. If it is a small like single family listing, you can actually in some states look up the public records to see who owns the property. You can do that in Texas, for example. So you can see if Chris Jones is saying they're the landlord on the property. You can look at public records, and if it says Chris Jones owns the property, you're like, okay, boom, I can connect the dots there. But make sure you get the ID to make sure Chris Jones is Chris Jones. And once again, no legit landlord is going to have any issue with identifying themselves to their tenant. Another thing you can do is also make sure the listings online match the listings in real life by just going to Google Street View and seeing if that actually is the property. I hope that helped. Share with the renter that needs to be an owner, and buy land. Rumor has it they're not making any more of it.